My father always told me that real lawyers wear suits to court, not ID badges to corporate campuses. He called my career in compliance a soft landing for the weak-willed. But when the procurement notification hit my inbox this morning, the name on the application froze the blood in my veins. Carter and Wexler. After 33 years of telling me I wasn't good enough, my father wasn't just asking for my attention, he was applying for a job. The air in the executive conference room was scrubbed clean, filtered to a precise 68 degrees, and smelled faintly of ozone and expensive coffee. We were 3,000 feet up in the Rocky Mountains for the Larkspur Risk Solutions quarterly leadership offsite. The view from the floor-to-ceiling windows was a jagged panorama of snow-capped granite, but nobody was looking at the mountains. Everyone was looking at the quarterly revenue projections projected on the smart screen. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, my hands clasped over a leather notebook. I had been general counsel at Larkspur for exactly 42 days. My predecessor had been fired for missing a regulatory deadline that cost the company $2 million in fines, so the seat I occupied still felt hot, dangerous, and provisional. Marcus, our CEO, stood at the head of the table. He was a man who spoke in bullet points and measured success in aggressive growth charts. He tapped the screen. "We are entering a new phase of maturity," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the room. "We are no longer just a startup selling compliance software. We are the infrastructure for the banking sector. That means we need grown-up governance." He turned his gaze toward me. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. The instinct to armor myself. That is why I brought Audrey in. Marcus continued. "I appreciate the quiet backbone she has already shown in the vendor audit. Strategy, risk, ethics. That is what keeps us alive when we scale this fast." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Thank you." Marcus, across the table. The VP of sales leaned back in his chair. His name was Brad, and he wore a vest that likely cost more than my first car. He spun a pen between his fingers. "Quiet backbone is great," Brad said, grinning. "As long as it does not kill my deal flow, we need legal to clear the runway, not build speed bumps. But hey, at least Audrey reads the fine print so I do not have to." The room chuckled. It was standard sales versus legal banter, the kind that happened in boardrooms across America every day. But then Brad added the chaser. "Besides, real lawyers wear suits to court and yell objection, right? We just need someone to sign the contracts." The laughter rippled again, louder this time. I froze. The smile plastered on my face felt like cracking plaster. Real lawyers. The phrase echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls of my memory before I could stop it. It was a harmless joke to Brad. He had no idea that he had just quoted, almost verbatim, the sentence that had defined the first 3 decades of my life. I forced myself to unclasp my hands. I picked up my water glass. I took a slow, deliberate sip. "Real lawyers keep you out of court." "Brad," I said, my voice steady, effectively killing the laughter. "If I am wearing a suit in a courtroom, it means we have already lost." Marcus nodded, approving. "Exactly. Let us move to the product roadmap." I exhaled, but the adrenaline did not leave my system. It sat heavy in my stomach for the rest of the retreat. I played the part of the polished executive. I discussed data privacy regulations and European compliance standards. I shook hands. I ate the catered salmon. But beneath the tailored blazer and the calm demeanor, I was 12 years old again, standing in a library that smelled of old paper and scotch, waiting for approval that never came. 2 days later, I was back in the Larkspur headquarters in Seattle. My office was a glass box on the 30th floor, overlooking the gray chop of the Puget Sound. It was a beautiful, stark space, minimalist furniture, dual monitors, a white noise machine to dampen the sound of the open floor plan outside. I loved this job. I loved the complexity of it. I loved taking a chaotic mess of regulatory requirements and building a clean, defensible system. It was architectural. It was strategic. It was the opposite of the performative theatricality my father worshipped. My computer pinged. A notification from the procurement portal. Subject: New vendor application. Outside counsel panel. Review required. I frowned. We were not actively looking for new outside counsel. We had a roster of reliable firms we used for employment law and intellectual property. I clicked the link, expecting to see a niche boutique firm offering specialized services. The screen loaded. The logo at the top of the application was embossed in a heavy serif font I knew better than my own handwriting. Carter and Wexler, LLP. My breath hitched. I blinked. Sure, I was hallucinating. I scrolled down. The application was polished, aggressive. They were applying for the primary slot on our litigation and internal investigations panel. It was a massive scope of work, and then I saw it. At the bottom of the form, under the field for authorizing partner, Graham H. Carter. The letters seemed to vibrate on the screen. My father. I pushed my chair back from the desk, the wheels rolling silently over the carpet. I stood up and walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Why? Carter and Wexler was a titan. They defended pharmaceutical giants and oil conglomerates. They did not apply to vendor portals for mid-sized tech companies. They did not fill out online forms. They waited for CEOs to call them in a panic, and then they charged $1,200 an hour to make problems disappear. For them to apply to us, to me, was beneath them. Unless it was not about the business. The memory hit me then, not as a thought, but as a sensory invasion, the smell of cedar, the heavy ticking of the grandfather clock. I was 26. I had just passed the bar exam on my first try, scoring in the top percentile. I had come home to tell him I had accepted a job as an in-house counsel for a logistics firm instead of accepting the associate offer at his firm. He was sitting in his leather wingback chair, reading a brief. He did not look up when I told him. He just turned the page. It is a good offer. Dad, I had said, my voice trembling. It is strategic. I want to build things, not just argue about them after they break. He finally looked at me. His eyes were blue and hard, like chips of ice. It is a desk job. Audrey, he said. You are becoming a paper pusher. You are afraid of the arena. I am not afraid. I just do not want your life. He laughed then, a short, dry sound. You do not have the stomach for my life. That is why you are running to a corporation. You want safety. You want a salary. Real lawyers eat what they kill. Real lawyers stand up in court and shape the law. I walked out of the room. He called after me, his voice not angry, but disappointed. Which was worse? You will never be a real lawyer. Audrey, you are just a glorified secretary with a Juris Doctor. 7 years later, standing in my glass office, I could still feel the heat of that shame. I had spent every day since trying to prove him wrong, building a reputation for ironclad ethics and strategic brilliance. I had risen to general counsel before 35, and now he was in my inbox. I turned back to the computer. I needed to handle this, not as a daughter, but as a general counsel. I opened a new email to the procurement team. To Sarah Jenkins, Head of Procurement, from Audrey Carter, General Counsel, subject, vendor application, Carter and Wexler, Sarah. I reviewed the incoming application from Carter and Wexler. Please be advised that I have a direct familial conflict of interest with this firm. The managing partner, Graham Carter, is my father. Given our strict vendor governance policies, I cannot be the sole approver on this. However, I must note that their engagement seems structurally unnecessary. We are fully covered for litigation by our current panel. I recommend we send a standard rejection based on current capacity. Best, Audrey. I hovered over the send button. It was professional. It was detached. It was safe. I clicked send. 10 minutes later, my office door opened without a knock. It was Ben, our chief operating officer. Ben was the kind of man who thought rules were suggestions and that speed was the only metric that mattered. He looked annoyed. Audrey, I just saw the flag on the procurement dashboard, Ben said, closing the door behind him. You want to reject Carter and Wexler? I looked up, keeping my face composed. Ben, my father runs that firm. It is a massive conflict. And besides, they are too expensive for our budget. We do not need them. Ben sat on the edge of my desk, a violation of space that always set my teeth on edge. Look, I get the family thing. He said, but do you know who they represent? They represent the biggest banks in New York. If we have Carter and Wexler on our letterhead, it validates us. It tells the market we are playing in the big leagues. It is not about the letterhead. Ben, I said, it is about the budget and the conflict. The conflict is easy. Ben dismissed. We just have you recuse yourself from the billing approval, but do not kill this application just because you have daddy issues. Audrey, the words hung in the air. Daddy issues. I stood up slowly. I am not killing it because of personal issues. I am flagging it because it violates our procurement neutrality. And frankly, Ben, a firm of that size applying to us through a web portal is strange. It suggests they are desperate for billable hours. Ben laughed. Carter and Wexler? Desperate? Come on. They are the gold standard. Do not make this weird. Audrey, let the process play out. If they are too expensive, we will negotiate, but do not block the door. He stood up and walked out. I sat back down, my hands shaking. Do not make this weird. It was the corporate version of calm down. Sweetheart, I needed a sanity check. I messaged Elena, our director of compliance. She was 20 years my senior, a woman who had survived 3 mergers and a SEC investigation. She was the only person in the building I trusted completely. Coffee, now, we met in the atrium downstairs. The noise of the espresso machines provided cover. I told her everything, the application, Ben's reaction, the history. Elena listened, stirring her black coffee. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she looked at me with sharp, intelligent eyes. Audrey, you are right to be paranoid, she said. Thank you. I exhaled. No, I mean about the firm, she clarified. Top-tier white shoe firms do not cold call mid-sized tech companies. They do not fill out vendor packets. They get referred by board members. They get hired over steak dinners. She leaned in closer. For Graham Carter to apply through the front door means one of 2 things. Either he wants access to you specifically, or his firm is bleeding and they are casting a wide net for cash flow. He does not need cash. I said, he is rich. Firms die slowly. And then all at once, Elena said, if they are applying to us, they are looking for something. And since he is your father, the target is on your back. I shivered. What do I do? You document everything, Elena said. You treat him like a hostile entity. You build a paper trail so thick it could stop a bullet. Because if Ben and the CEO want the prestige, they are going to hire him. And when it goes sideways, they are going to blame you. I went back to my desk and worked until the sun went down. The office emptied out, the lights dimming automatically to save energy. I reviewed 3 contracts and approved a privacy policy update, but my mind was elsewhere. At 7:30 in the evening, my cell phone rang. I looked at the screen. Dad. I stared at it. I could let it go to voicemail. I could pretend I was in a meeting. But avoidance was what the old Audrey would have done, the weak Audrey. I took a deep breath, picked up a pen, and opened my notebook to a fresh page. I wrote the date and the time at the top. I answered, "Hello, Dad, Audrey." His voice was warm, rich, enveloping. It was the voice he used when he was charming a jury or wooing a client. It was not the voice he used when he told me I was a failure. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said. "I know how late you corporate types work. I am just wrapping up." I said, "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I saw the news about your appointment." He said, "General Counsel, that is a serious title." "Sweetheart, I wanted to call and congratulate you. Your mother and I are very proud." I tightened my grip on the pen. He had never said he was proud of my career. Never. "Thank you," I said. "And," he continued, smoothly pivoting, "I realize that my firm has not done a good enough job supporting the local tech ecosystem. We are expanding our practice. I saw that Larkspur is growing. I thought, why not keep it in the family? We would love to support you. Audrey," I wrote down, "claims desire to support. Framed as expanding practice. Dad," I said, keeping my voice level. "I saw the application. You know I cannot be involved in that decision. It is a conflict of interest. Of course, he said, dismissive. We can wall you off? I just want to make sure you have the best protection. You are playing with big data now. Audrey, regulators are hungry. You need real litigators behind you if the Department of Justice comes knocking. Not just compliance people. There it was. The dig. We have a very capable team. I said, I am sure you do, he said. But when the house catches fire, you do not want a team. You want a firefighter. We submitted a supplemental packet this afternoon. Just some thoughts on your current risk profile. Take a look at it. No obligation. I wrote down, mentioned supplemental packet, implied current risk profile. I have to go. Dad, I said, I have a dinner meeting. Always busy. He chuckled. Good. Keeps you sharp. We will talk soon. Audrey. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My hand was cramping from gripping the pen so hard. I looked at my notes. They were sparse, but they were evidence. He was positioning himself as a savior. He was implying I was in over my head. My inbox chimed. A new email from procurement. Subject, FW. Supplemental materials. Carter and Wexler, text. Audrey. The firm just sent this over. They said it contains specific analysis relevant to our current roadmap. Ben wants you to review it. Say P. I opened the attachment. It was a glossy PDF, beautifully designed. The cover page featured a stock photo of a gavel and a microchip. I scrolled through the first few pages. It was standard marketing fluff. Awards they had won. Partners' bios. Then I reached page 10. The heading read, Strategic Risk Analysis for Larkspur Internal Initiatives. I started reading, and the blood drained from my face. The document listed potential legal pitfalls for 3 specific projects. 1. The automated healthcare data scraping tool. 2. The new banking, API integration. 3. Project Chimera. I stopped breathing. Project Chimera was the internal code name for our unreleased AI behavioral analysis tool. It was top secret. It did not exist on our website. It did not exist in our public filings. It barely existed in our own internal documentation. Only the executive team and a handful of lead engineers knew that name. There was absolutely no way my father or his firm should know that Project Chimera existed. I looked at the screen, the words blurring slightly. This was not a sales pitch. This was not a father trying to reconnect with his daughter. This was a breach. Someone inside Larkspur was feeding information to Carter and Wexler. I looked at the handwritten note on my desk. Proud of you. Want to support you. I realized then that the war had already started. I was just the last one to know. I saved the email to a secure local folder. I printed a hard copy and locked it in my drawer. I turned off my monitor. I sat in the dark office for a long time, watching the ferry boats cross the black water of the Sound. My father was right about one thing. The house was going to catch fire. But he was wrong about who was holding the matches. I picked up my bag and walked out of the office. I did not feel like a fraud anymore. I felt like a hunter. If he wanted to see a real lawyer, I would show him one. But I would not be wearing a suit in a courtroom. I would be dismantling him, piece by piece, from the inside out. I took the elevator down to the parking garage. The silence of the building settling around me like a shield. The game had changed, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't playing for his approval. I was playing for survival, and I intended to win. The next morning, the sky was a bruised purple over Seattle, threatening rain. I arrived at the office at 6:30, before the cleaning crews had even finished vacuuming the lobby. I needed to see the full packet again. I needed to dissect it. I unlocked my office, the air stagnant from the night before. I pulled the hard copy of the Carter and Wexler document from my drawer and spread it out on my desk. I grabbed a red pen. I circled Project Chimera. Who knew? Marcus, the CEO, Ben, the COO, Brad, the VP of Sales, Elena, Compliance, the CTO, a quiet genius named Sanjay, and about 5 senior engineers. It was a short list. If my father knew about Chimera, he knew our vulnerabilities. The project was legally gray. It scraped behavioral data to predict risk. But the consent models were still being built. If a regulator looked at Chimera right now, they would shut us down. My father was not offering to defend us. He was letting me know he had leverage. I looked at the date on the supplemental packet. It was time-stamped yesterday afternoon, 3 hours before he called me. I picked up my phone and dialed the extension for IT security. "Hey, this is Audrey Carter," I said when the night shift tech answered. "Good morning, Ms. Carter. I need a favor," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I need a log of all external emails sent by the executive leadership team in the last 30 days. Just metadata. Who sent what to whom? No content." There was a pause. "That requires a warrant or CEO approval." "Ms. Carter, I am general counsel," I said, injecting a tone of steely authority I did not feel. "This is a preliminary compliance audit regarding potential IP leakage. I do not need to read the emails. I just need to know if any attachments were sent to external domains. Specifically, any domains ending in H, https:// google.com/search?q equals carterwexler.com. The tech hesitated. "I will take full responsibility," I added. "If anyone asks, tell them it is part of the vendor governance review." "Okay," he said. "Give me an hour." I hung up. My heart was hammering. I was investigating my own boss, my own peers. If I was wrong, I would be fired. If I was right, I was at war with my own family and potentially my own company. I walked to the coffee machine in the break room. As I waited for the brew, Ben walked in. He looked fresh, rested, wearing a crisp blue shirt. "Morning, Audrey," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Did you look at that packet? Pretty impressive stuff." I turned to him. It was detailed. I said carefully, "Surprisingly detailed. They did their homework." Ben said, pouring himself a cup. "That is what you pay for. That is the premium." He took a sip and looked at me over the rim of the cup. "We are setting up a meet and greet with Graham Carter next week," Ben said. "Marcus wants to fast-track this." "Next week?" I asked. "Ben, we haven't even finished the conflict check." Ben smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Audrey, we are a business. We move fast. Do not be the department of no. Just get the paperwork ready." He walked out. I watched him go. He wasn't just impatient. He was anxious. I went back to my desk. The red circle around Project Chimera stared up at me. My father had planted a flag in my territory. He thought I would crumble. He thought I would revert to the little girl who cried when he criticized her debate prep. He thought I would be so desperate for his validation that I would open the gates and let the Trojan horse in. I picked up the red pen and wrote one word next to the circle. No, I would not crumble. I would audit. I would investigate. And I would protect this company, even if I had to burn down my own heritage to do it. I opened my laptop and started typing a new document. File name: Internal Investigation, Vendor Governance Anomalies. Date: October 14th. Investigator: Audrey Carter. General Counsel. Subject: Unauthorized disclosure of confidential information to third party. I typed the first sentence. This file documents the irregular application process of Carter and Wexler, LLP, and the potential compromise of Larkspur Risk Solutions proprietary trade secrets. I saved the file. Let them come. I was ready. I treated the vendor application process like a crime scene. Most people view procurement questionnaires as administrative hurdles, the corporate equivalent of filing taxes. But I knew that in the empty spaces between the checkboxes, truth usually hid. I drafted a formal request for information under Larkspur's vendor governance policy. Section 4. I did not write it as a daughter asking her father for a favor. I wrote it as the general counsel of a regulated financial technology company asking a vendor to prove they were not a liability. I requested the standard disclosures. a list of all active malpractice claims in the last 5 years, a certificate of insurance with a minimum of $10 million in coverage, a conflict of interest inventory, and most crucially, a list of their top 5 revenue-generating clients by sector. I hit send. The response from Carter and Wexler came back in under 3 hours. Speed is usually a sign of efficiency. In law, however, extreme speed is often a sign of a pre-packaged narrative. When I opened the files, I saw exactly what I expected: polish without substance. The malpractice section contained a single, carefully worded statement claiming no material adverse judgments. It was a lawyer's answer. It did not say they hadn't been sued. It said they hadn't lost a judgment that they considered material. But the client list was the smoking gun. It was blank. In its place was a paragraph about client confidentiality and elite discretion. Carter and Wexler, the document claimed, did not disclose its partners merely to satisfy administrative forms. I sat back in my chair, the ergonomic mesh digging into my spine. Every law firm has confidentiality agreements, but every law firm also knows that when you apply to be outside counsel for a company handling banking data, you have to disclose your other banking clients to prove you aren't conflicted. Refusing to name them wasn't discretion. It was evasion. I was staring at the screen, analyzing the font choice, Garamond, my father's favorite, when a soft knock broke my concentration. It was Leo, a junior analyst from the procurement team. Leo was 24, eager, and terrified of making a mistake. He hovered in the doorway, clutching a tablet like a shield. "Ms. Carter, do you have a minute? Come in." "Leo," I said, minimizing the document. He stepped inside and closed the door. Checking the hallway first. That was never a good sign. "I wanted to flag something about the Carter and Wexler application," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I know your father is the partner, so I didn't want to put this in an email." I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. "What is it, Leo?" "Well, usually when vendors submit these forms, they get stuck on the cybersecurity addendum. It is really technical. Most firms take a week to fill it out, or they ask us for clarification." He tapped his tablet. Carter and Wexler filled it out perfectly. I mean, word for word perfectly. They used our internal terminology. They referenced the exact ISO standards we use in our audits, not the general industry ones. I went very still. "What are you saying?" Leo swallowed hard. "It looks like they had the answer key. Ms. Carter, it looks like someone coached them." I looked at the kid. He was smart. He had noticed the anomaly that a more senior, jaded employee might have missed. "Thank you, Leo," I said, keeping my voice even. "You did the right thing telling me. Who else handled the initial outreach to them?" "Nobody." He said, "That is the other thing. There is no record of an outbound request. The application just appeared in the portal, fully populated. But the metadata on their upload shows it was created 3 days ago. 3 days ago, before I even knew they were interested. Leave it with me, Leo," I said. "And Leo, let's keep this conversation between us for now." He nodded, relieved to be absolved of the burden, and slipped out. I turned back to the window. The gray Seattle sky pressed against the glass. Someone inside Larkspur, someone with access to our security protocols, was not just opening the door for my father, they were handing him the blueprints. The Trojan horse arrived at 2:00 in the afternoon. My administrative assistant, Jessica, buzzed me. "Audrey, a delivery just came for you." "It is huge." I walked out to the reception area. Sitting on the sleek white counter was a wicker basket the size of a small car engine. It was wrapped in cellophane and tied with a navy blue ribbon. Carter and Wexler blue. It was obscene. It was filled with truffle oils, imported cheeses, aged balsamic, and bottles of wine that probably cost more than Jessica's weekly salary. A card was tucked into the ribbon, written in heavy cream cardstock. I reached for it, my hand trembling slightly. I recognized the handwriting immediately. The sharp, angular slant, the heavy pressure of the pen. To Audrey and the Larkspur team, congratulations on the new role. I am so proud you finally have a real title. Let's do great things together. Love, Dad. I stared at the words. Finally have a real title. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. It sounded complimentary to anyone else, but to me, it was a precise, surgical strike. It implied that everything I had done before, my years as a senior counsel, my work in regulatory strategy, was fake. It implied that I only mattered now because I controlled a budget he wanted. Jessica was beaming. "That is so sweet of your dad." I looked at the basket. It felt like a bribe. It felt like a leash. "Send it back," I said. Jessica's smile faltered. "What?" "Return to sender," I said, my voice hardening. "Call the courier. Tell them it was refused." "But it is wine. It is really nice wine. It is a violation of our gift policy." I lied. The policy was actually quite lenient, allowing gifts under $200. But this basket was easily worth $1,000. But that wasn't the point. I cannot accept vendor gifts during an active procurement review. It compromises neutrality. Jessica looked crushed, but she nodded. "Okay, I will call them." I walked back to my office, my heart pounding a rhythm of rage. He was trying to Bigfoot me. He was trying to mark his territory in my own lobby. He wanted everyone to see the basket and think, "Look how connected they are. Look how much he loves her." He wanted to make it impossible for me to say no without looking like a petulant child. I sat at my desk and forced myself to breathe. Anger is a loss of control. He used to tell me, emotion is a chaotic variable. Fine, I would be cold. I would be a variable he couldn't solve. I needed to know why they were so desperate. A firm like Carter and Wexler doesn't send gift baskets to mid-sized tech companies unless they are hungry. I opened a private browser window. I started searching legal recruitment forums, the gossip sites, the places where associates complained about their bosses anonymously. I found a thread from 2 weeks ago titled, "Fire Sale at CW." The comments were illuminating. Anyone else getting hit up by CW recruiters? They are offering 20% above market for mid-levels. Yeah, but check the retention clauses. They are locking people in for 3 years. Smells like panic hiring. I heard they lost the Titan Energy account. That is like 30% of their billables. I scrolled down. Not just Titan. I heard a rumor that a senior partner is being forced out quietly. Something about a conflict check that got buried. My stomach turned. Panic hiring. High signing bonuses. Loss of a major client. They were hollowing out. They needed Larkspur not for the prestige, but for the cash flow. They needed a reliable, recurring revenue stream to plug a hole in their balance sheet before the end of the fiscal year. I needed confirmation. I picked up my personal phone and walked to the stairwell. The only place in the building with guaranteed privacy. I dialed Maya. Maya and I had survived law school together. We had bonded over cheap wine and a shared hatred of civil procedure. Now, she was a senior claims adjuster at a major legal malpractice insurer. She knew where all the bodies were buried because she was the one writing the checks to cover the funerals. "Audrey?" she answered on the second ring. "To what do I owe the honor?" "You usually only call me when you're drunk or indicted." "I am neither." "Sadly," I said, leaning against the concrete wall. "I need a sanity check." "Hypothetically." "I love hypotheticals," she said. "Hypothetically, if a top-tier firm, let's call them Parker and Sexler, was suddenly aggressively courting a mid-sized tech client for a general litigation retainer, and throwing money at mid-level associates despite losing a major energy client, what would that smell like to you?" There was a long silence on the other end. "Audrey, does this hypothetical firm rhyme with Carter and Wexler?" I said nothing. Maya sighed. "Look, I cannot talk about specific policies. You know that. I know. Just tell me the weather report." "The weather is unstable," she said carefully. "There is a low-pressure system moving through. Rumor has it there is a sealed dispute in the Southern District of New York involving a firm matching that description. It involves the mishandling of privileged data. And if the rumors are true, the deductible on their policy is about to get hammered. Mishandling of privileged data for a law firm. That was the cardinal sin. It was worse than theft. It was incompetence." "Thanks, Maya. Stay dry." I hung up. My father wasn't just losing money. He was sitting on a ticking time bomb of reputational ruin. If that sealed dispute went public, his firm would bleed clients. He needed Larkspur as a lifeboat. He needed to show the market that a cutting-edge tech company trusted him with their data. Proving that the rumors were false, he was using me as a human shield. I walked back to my desk, my mind racing. I had enough to stall the application. I could demand details on the sealed dispute. I could force a disclosure. But when I sat down, my calendar pinged. A new invite had been added to my schedule. Title: Strategic Partnership Kickoff. Carter Wexler. Time: tomorrow, 10 a.m. Organizer: Marcus Vance. CEO. Attendees: Graham Carter, Audrey Carter, Brad, Sales, Ben, COO. I stared at the invite. I hadn't approved this. I hadn't even finished the vendor review. I stood up and walked straight to Marcus's office. His assistant tried to wave me down, but I kept walking. The glass door was open. Marcus was putting golf balls into a cup on the carpet. He looked up, surprised by my sudden entrance. "Audrey," he said, smiling. "Perfect timing. Did you see the invite?" "Marcus," I said, closing the door behind me, "we cannot have that meeting." He straightened up, leaning on his putter. "Why not?" "Because the vetting process isn't finished." I said, "There are red flags in their application. They refuse to disclose their client list. There are rumors of financial instability. And frankly, scheduling a meeting with a vendor I am actively auditing undermines my entire department." Marcus sighed, a sound of patient condescension. "Audrey, I appreciate the diligence. Really, I do. But Brad has a potential contract with First National Bank on the line. First National uses Carter and Wexler. If they see us working with the same firm, it builds trust. It greases the wheels." He walked over to his desk and sat down. "This isn't a marriage. Audrey, it is just a meeting. Your father is a legend in this town. Having him in the building adds value. Do not let your personal history cloud your business judgment. My personal history is the only reason I know he is dangerous." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "I will attend, but I will be asking hard questions regarding their data governance." Marcus waved a hand. "Ask whatever you want. Just don't kill the vibe, okay? We need this win." The conference room the next morning felt like a stage. The table was polished to a mirror shine. Pastries were arranged in an artistic pyramid. Graham Carter walked in at 10 o'clock exactly. He looked impeccable. He was 65, but he looked 50. Silver hair, tailored navy suit, a silk tie that shimmered under the halogen lights. He carried himself with the easy, terrifying confidence of a man who has never waited in line for anything. He shook Marcus's hand first. Two sharks recognizing each other in the water. "Marcus," he said, his voice booming, "I have heard great things about your growth numbers. Impressive work." "Graham?" Marcus beamed. "An honor to have you here." Then my father turned to me. He didn't hug me. He didn't offer a handshake. He just smiled, a soft, indulgent smile that made me feel 6 years old. "Audrey," he said, "you look tired. Are they working you too hard?" I stiffened. "I am fine. Dad, thank you for coming." He took a seat at the head of the table. My seat, technically, as the general counsel leading the meeting, but I didn't fight him for it. I sat opposite him. The meeting began with Brad, the sales VP, giving a high-energy presentation about our growth trajectory. My father listened, nodding sagely, asking questions that were just specific enough to sound intelligent without requiring actual knowledge of the tech stack. Then it was my turn. I cleared my throat. "Graham, regarding the vendor application, I noticed you left the client disclosure section blank. Given the sensitivity of our data, we need to know who else you represent in the banking sector to screen for conflicts." My father chuckled. He looked at Marcus, then back at me. "Audrey, always the stickler." He said warmly, "Look, I appreciate the administrative boxes you have to check. It is very thorough. But you have to understand, our clients value discretion above all else. We don't publish lists. We solve problems." I pressed on. "It is not administrative. Graham, it is a governance requirement. We are audited by the FDIC. We cannot hire a firm with undisclosed conflicts." He leaned back, tenting his fingers. "Audrey," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming intimate, as if we were alone in the room. "I know you are used to the corporate compliance world. It is very black and white, checklists, forms, but at my level, law is about relationships. It is about trust. Marcus understands that." He turned to Marcus. "We are ready to deploy a rapid response team for Larkspur. 24/7 coverage. If you have a data breach, if you have a whistleblower, we are there before the press release goes out. You don't get that from a checklist." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "That is exactly what we need. Speed. I tried one more time. And the rumors of the sealed dispute regarding data mishandling? Can you comment on that?" The room went silent. Brad looked at his phone. Marcus looked annoyed. My father didn't flinch. He just smiled, a shark baring its teeth. "Audrey is so detail-oriented, isn't she?" he said to the room. "It is her greatest strength. She finds ghosts where there are only shadows. No, there is no dispute that affects our ability to represent you. I am hurt. You would think I would put you at risk." "Sweetheart," he said sweetheart like it was an insult. The room laughed, a tension breaking, nervous laughter. Marcus laughed the loudest. I sat there, burning. He had done it. He had turned my due diligence into a daughter's neurotic anxiety. He had framed my professionalism as petty administrative obsession. He was charming them, and he was erasing me. "Let's move on to the fee structure," Marcus said, signaling that my part of the meeting was over. I sat in silence for the rest of the hour, taking notes that were jagged and dark. I watched my father seduce my company. I watched him sell them a lie. When the meeting ended, my father stood up and buttoned his jacket. "Great meeting, everyone," he said. "Audrey, walk me out?" I stood up. I didn't want to, but refusing would look petulant. We walked to the elevators in silence. When the doors closed, trapping us in the steel box, the smile dropped from his face. "You are playing a dangerous game." "Audrey," he said softly, "I am doing my job." I said, "You are embarrassing yourself." He countered, "Asking about rumors? In front of your CEO? You looked weak. You looked scared. I am not scared of you." "Dad." He laughed. A short, sharp bark. "You are terrified. You always have been. You built this little castle of rules and policies to hide in because you couldn't hack it in the real world. Now the real world is here. Don't stand in the way of business. Audrey, you will get run over." The elevator dinged. The doors opened to the lobby. He stepped out, then turned back, his face transforming instantly back into the benevolent patriarch. "Call your mother," he said loudly. "For the benefit of the receptionist, she misses you." He walked out the revolving doors, into the rain. I went back to my office and closed the door. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of suppressed rage. "You looked weak." I sat down at my computer. I needed to document the meeting. I needed to write down exactly what he had said about the dispute. No dispute that affects our ability to represent you. That was a qualified denial. That was a lie. My inbox pinged. It wasn't a corporate email. It was a message to my work address, but the sender field was encrypted. Subject: Warning. I opened it. The body of the email was a single sentence. "If your company hires them, you'll inherit their mess." Attached was a single image file, a screenshot. I clicked it. It was a screenshot of an Outlook calendar invite, presumably from inside Carter and Wexler's system. Title: Operation Larkspur. Containment Plan. Date: October 12th. Notes: Objective is to secure privileged channel for legacy data migration. Shield strictly under attorney-client privilege. Priority Alpha. I stared at the screen. Containment Plan. You don't contain a client. You contain a spill. You contain a virus. And legacy data migration? Why would an outside law firm be involved in data migration? That was an IT function. Unless they were trying to hide something, or unless they were planning to use our servers to store something they didn't want found on their own. Secure privileged channel. They wanted to use the attorney-client privilege to bury something deep inside Larkspur's infrastructure. If Carter and Wexler were our counsel, any data they sent us would be privileged. It would be shielded from discovery in a lawsuit. My father wasn't looking for a client. He was looking for a vault. He was looking for a place to hide evidence. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. The anger evaporated, replaced by the icy precision of the lawyer I was supposed to be. This wasn't a family drama anymore. This was a conspiracy. I didn't reply to the anonymous email. I didn't call Marcus. Marcus was compromised. He was too desperate for the sale. I picked up my phone and dialed the internal extension for IT security. "Steve, it is Audrey." I said, "Hey Audrey." "Steve, I need you to initiate a litigation hold immediately." "Who are we suing?" he asked. "Nobody yet," I said, "but I need you to preserve all records related to the Carter and Wexler vendor application. Every email, every calendar invite, every metadata tag. And Steve, lock it down. No delete access for anyone, not even the CEO." There was a pause. "Audrey, blocking the CEO requires board authorization." "I know." I said, "Do it anyway. I will get the authorization." I hung up. Then I opened my contact list and scrolled past Marcus, past Ben, past everyone in the C-suite. I found the number for Helen Joe. Helen was the chair of the audit committee of the board of directors. She was a former federal prosecutor. She was terrifying, brilliant, and completely independent of the management team. If I called her, I was crossing the Rubicon. I was going over my CEO's head. If I was wrong, I would be fired for insubordination. I would be the ungrateful daughter my father always said I was. But I looked at the screenshot again. Containment plan. I wasn't the angry daughter. I wasn't the compliance officer checking boxes. I was the general counsel, and my company was under attack. I dialed Helen's number. She answered on the first ring. "Audrey? Everything okay?" "Helen," I said, my voice steady and cold. "We have a governance failure. I need to open a formal internal investigation, and I need to do it without Marcus knowing." I waited for the blowback. I waited for her to tell me to follow the chain of command. Instead, she said 2 words. "I'm listening." Helen Joe lived in a mid-century modern fortress in the hills of West Seattle, a house of glass and steel that looked like it was brooding over the city. I arrived at 7 in the evening, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof of my car. I checked my rearview mirror 3 times before parking. It was a paranoid habit I had developed in the last 48 hours, a side effect of realizing my life had become a case file. Helen opened the door wearing a cashmere cardigan and holding a glass of scotch. She was 70, a former federal prosecutor who had dismantled insider trading rings for sport in the 90s. She didn't smile. She just stepped aside to let me in. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "Audrey," she said, leading me into a living room that smelled of teak oil and wood smoke. "I have seen worse." I said, "I have seen a breach." I sat on her sofa and laid it out. I didn't use adjectives. I didn't talk about my feelings or my father's psychological warfare. I laid out the timeline, the unsolicited application, the copy-pasted internal terminology, the missing conflict checks, and finally, the anonymous screenshot of the calendar invite titled Containment Plan. Helen listened with the stillness of a predator waiting for movement. She took a sip of her scotch, her eyes never leaving my face. "So," she said, her voice dry, "you think Graham Carter is not just chasing fees. You think he is building a bunker." "I think he's trying to use attorney-client privilege to bury something inside our systems," I said, "and I think someone on our executive team is holding the shovel." Helen set her glass down on a stone coaster. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. "This is dangerous ground. Audrey, you are accusing the CEO of collusion. If you are wrong, you are uninsurable. You will never work as a general counsel again." "I know," I said, "but if I am right and we onboard a compromised vendor who then mishandles our data, we are looking at a securities fraud investigation. Larkspur fails. The stock goes to 0. Helen stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the dark tree line. You have the instincts, she said softly. Most GCs would have signed the engagement letter just to make the CEO happy. They would have chosen peace over governance. She turned back to me. I am authorizing a narrow internal review, she said formally. I want to know who leaked the vendor criteria. Steve looked like he hadn't slept. He was wearing a hoodie that said, I read your email in binary code. Tell me you found something. I said. Steve spun his chair around. He looked nervous. I ran the search you asked for. He said, I looked for the specific phrases from the Carter and Wexler supplemental packet. You know, compliance-first architecture and regulatory friction points. And I found the source, Steve said. He pulled up a log on his monitor. 3 weeks ago, Brad, our VP of Sales, forwarded a folder of internal policy documents to a Gmail address, bradster1985@gmail.com. I stared at the screen. Brad, of course. He sent it to himself? I asked. Yeah, Steve said. And then, 2 hours later, that Gmail account forwarded the same folder to an external address, ghc@carterwexler.com. Graham H. Carter, my father. I felt a surge of validation mixed with nausea. It wasn't a sophisticated hack. It wasn't a zero-day exploit. It was the oldest security flaw in the world. A sales guy trying to be helpful. Did he encrypt it? I asked. No, Steve said, shaking his head. Plain text. He sent our entire vendor governance framework, our risk appetite statement, and the draft overview of Project Chimera to your father's personal work email. Preserve it. I said, hash the file. Make a forensic copy. I am already doing it. Steve said, but Audrey, Brad is the golden boy. He brought in 40% of our revenue last quarter. If you go after him, I am not going after him. Steve, I am just asking questions. I waited until 9:30, until I knew Brad would be settled in, caffeinated, and feeling invincible. I walked to his office. He was on the phone, his feet up on the desk, laughing loud enough to be heard 3 doors down. He saw me and held up a finger. Yeah, listen, I gotta run. Legal is here to ruin my fun. Yeah, bye. He hung up and grinned at me. Audrey, to what do I owe the pleasure? Did I use the wrong font size on a contract again? I closed the door. I didn't sit down. Brad, we need to talk about the Carter and Wexler application. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then reassembled itself. Great firm, real heavy hitters. Marcus is pumped about the meeting yesterday. I know. I said, I am just confused about one thing. Their application quoted our internal risk policies almost verbatim, policies that aren't public. Brad shrugged. Maybe they are just smart. Maybe they know the industry. I took a step closer to his desk. Brad, IT flagged a transfer from your corporate account to your personal Gmail, and then to Graham Carter. 3 weeks ago. The color drained from his face. It wasn't a slow fade. It was instant. He took his feet off the desk and sat up straight. Whoa, hold on, he said, his voice jumping an octave. You are auditing my email? I am auditing the vendor process, I corrected, and I found a leak. Why did you send proprietary documents to an outside counsel before they were even retained? Brad stood up, defensive now, puffing out his chest. Look, Audrey, it was networking, okay? I met your dad at the charity gala for the Children's Hospital last month. We got to talking. He is a legend. He asked me about the company, about our challenges, and he said he could help. He said he could introduce us to the general counsels at the big banks. He said if he understood our risk model, he could vouch for us. So you sent him our internal documents? I sent him background info, Brad shouted. Flushing red. It was business development. I was trying to close deals. Audrey, you know, the thing that pays your salary? Did you disclose this to me? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Did you disclose that you were feeding inside information to a vendor? It wasn't a formal thing, Brad sputtered. It was just guys talking shop. He said he wanted to tailor his pitch. He said he wanted to impress you. He said, help me help Audrey. I froze. Help me help Audrey. He had manipulated Brad. He had played on Brad's ego and his desire for revenue, wrapping it all in a package of fatherly concern. "Brad," I said, "you violated the NDA, you violated the information security policy, and you compromised the integrity of the vendor selection." "Oh, come on," Brad scoffed. "Nobody got hurt. We are going to hire them anyway. Marcus wants it done. Stop being such a cop." I looked at him. He really didn't get it. He thought rules were just friction. "I am pausing the process, Brad, and you are going to write a formal statement explaining exactly what you sent him and why." "You can't do that," he sneered. "Marcus will flip. Let Marcus flip," I said. "But if you don't write that statement by noon, I am reporting this to the board as a malicious insider breach, and you won't just be fired, Brad, you will be sued." I turned and walked out. I could feel his eyes burning a hole in my back. I needed to cool down. I went to the break room on the 4th floor, the one nobody used because the coffee machine was broken. I sat at a wobbly table and stared at my hands. Help me help Audrey. He was everywhere. He was in my systems. He was in my colleagues' heads. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Elena. "The compliance director. Come to my office. Now. Close the door." I ran up the stairs. Elena was standing by her window, looking pale. Her desk was covered in files. "What is it?" I asked. "Audrey, I found something in the regulatory correspondence log." She said, "I was looking for the quarterly reports, and I saw a file path that had been hidden." "Hidden how?" "Marked as privileged. CEO eyes only. But because I have the admin key for the compliance archive, I could see the header." She handed me a piece of paper. "From Office of Civil Rights, OCR, Department of Health and Human Services, to Marcus Vance, CEO. Notice of investigation. Potential HIPAA violation. Project Chimera." I felt the air leave the room. The OCR, they were the regulators who enforced HIPAA. If they were investigating Project Chimera, our AI tool that scraped healthcare data, we were in deep trouble. "When is this dated?" I asked. 6 weeks ago, Elena whispered. "Marcus has been sitting on a federal investigation for 6 weeks. He hasn't told the board. He hasn't told legal. That is why he needs Carter and Wexler." I realized aloud, it all clicked into place. The urgency, the desperation for a big name. Marcus didn't want a general counsel. He wanted a shield. He wanted a firm with the political connections to make a federal investigation go away quietly. And my father knew. Graham Carter didn't just stumble upon Larkspur. He smelled the blood. He knew Marcus was vulnerable. He probably knew about the investigation before I did. That was why he was stressing rapid deployment. "He is exploiting us," I said. "My father knows we are under the gun. He is coming in to clean up Marcus's mess, and in exchange, he gets full control of our legal strategy. And a massive paycheck," Elena added. "And leverage," I said. "If he saves Marcus from the OCR, he owns him." I looked at the document. This was radioactive. Marcus had concealed a material event. That was a firing offense. "Does anyone else know?" I asked. "Just us," Elena said, "and presumably Marcus, and whoever is advising him." My phone rang. It was him. Graham Carter. I looked at Elena. She nodded. "Answer it." I picked up the phone. "Hello, Dad. Audrey," he said. His voice was bright, energetic. "I was just thinking about our meeting yesterday. I felt we got off on the wrong foot." "Did we?" I asked. "I think I embarrassed you," he said. "That was not my intention. I know how hard you work to be taken seriously." The backhanded apology, a classic maneuver. "I am calling with an olive branch," he continued. "I know you are worried about the budget. And I know you are worried about oversight." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch. "So here is what I propose," he said. "A special arrangement. I will discount our standard blended rate by 40%. We will bill it as a flat monthly retainer. So you have cost certainty." 40% was unheard of. That was below cost for a firm like his. "What is the catch?" I asked. "No catch," he said smoothly. "Just efficiency. We will sign a direct engagement letter for a specific scope of work, strategic advisory. It won't go through the general litigation panel. You won't have to bother with the monthly itemized audits. We will just report directly to the CEO's office, with a dotted line to you. Of course. I closed my eyes. There it was. Report directly to the CEO. No itemized audits. He was offering me a discount in exchange for removing my eyes from the bill. He wanted to work directly with Marcus, bypassing the legal department's oversight. He wanted to handle the OCR investigation in the dark, where I couldn't see the methods he used, and if I agreed, I would be complicit. That is a very generous offer. Dad, I said, I thought so. He said, it solves everyone's problem. Marcus gets his protection, you get your budget, and we get to work together. I will have to review the engagement letter. I said, of course, I will send it over. But Audrey, Marcus is in a hurry. Do not let the paperwork slow down the solution. He hung up. I lowered the phone. He is trying to bypass me. I told Elena. He wants a direct line to Marcus with no audit trail. Elena looked at me with sympathy. He is good, isn't he? He is the best, I said bitterly. But he made a mistake. What mistake? He assumed I would be relieved to be cut out of the loop. He assumed I wanted to be saved. I grabbed the OCR notice. I am not going to be saved. Elena, I am going to do my job. I went back to my office. I pulled the Carter and Wexler application packet out again. I laid it side by side with the notes from the containment plan screenshot. I started looking for patterns. My father's firm kept using specific phrases: media-ready response, reputational inoculation, stakeholder management. This wasn't legal language. This was crisis PR language. They weren't planning to litigate the OCR case. They were planning to spin it. They were expecting a leak. They were expecting a public scandal. Why? If the investigation was confidential, why prepare for a media storm? Unless they were planning to leak it themselves, or unless the breach was bigger than just an investigation. My desk phone rang. Not my cell, the landline, the one that nobody used except for internal transfers. I picked it up. Audrey Carter. There was a crackle of static, then a voice. It sounded digital, distorted, like someone speaking through a modulator app. Ask why they need your company's SOC reports. The line went dead. I stared at the receiver. My hand was damp. SOC reports, system and organization controls. They were the holy grail of our security architecture. SOC, 2 Type 2 reports, contained detailed descriptions of our internal controls, our encryption standards, our firewall configurations, and our data handling processes. Vendors didn't need our SOC reports. We needed theirs. I logged into the procurement portal. I went to the document request tab for Carter and Wexler. I scrolled through the list of files they had requested from us: corporate bylaws, insurance policies, Larkspur SOC, 2 Type 2, report, current, penetration test results, Q3. I stopped breathing. They had requested our penetration test results, the roadmap of our security weaknesses, and the status of the request was marked fulfilled. I slammed my hand on the desk. I stormed out of my office and marched down to procurement. The open plan office went quiet as I walked in. I found Sarah Jenkins, the head of procurement. Sarah, I said, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. Why did we release our SOC2 and pen test results to Carter and Wexler? Sarah looked up, startled. She adjusted her glasses. Audrey? What do you mean? I mean the document exchange. I said, we never give vendors our pen test results. That is a critical security violation. Who authorized that release? Sarah looked at her screen. She clicked a few times. Oh, that, she said. The CEO's office called. Ben, actually, he said Marcus wanted the onboarding fast-tracked. He said Carter and Wexler needed to understand our security environment to advise us properly. He told us to just give them whatever they asked for. You released our vulnerability map to an outside law firm without a signed contract? I asked, my voice rising. Ben said it was urgent. Sarah said, looking defensive. He said legal was being a bottleneck. We were just trying to get it done. Audrey, I looked around the room. Leo, the junior analyst, was watching me with wide eyes. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting my father. I was fighting the culture of my own company, a culture that valued speed over safety, deal-making over integrity. My father had weaponized that culture against me. I took a deep breath. "Sarah," I said, "revoke access. Now." But Ben said, "I don't care what Ben said," I shouted, snapping the tether of my composure. "I am the general counsel, and I am telling you that sharing those documents is a breach of our customer contracts. Revoke access immediately, or I will have this entire department audited for gross negligence." Sarah turned pale. She started typing furiously. "Done," she whispered. "Access revoked." I turned around and walked back to the elevators. My legs felt heavy. I had stopped the bleeding, but the wound was deep. My father had our secrets. He had our vulnerabilities, and he had the CEO in his pocket. I returned to my office and closed the door. I locked it. I sat at my desk and pulled out a fresh legal pad. I had to make a choice. Option A: go along with it. Let Marcus hire the firm. Let my father handle the OCR investigation. Hope that he was actually good at his job and would protect the company. Keep my job. Keep the peace. Option B: drop the nuclear bomb. I picked up my pen. I wrote, "Notice of legal hold. To Board of Directors. From Audrey Carter, General Counsel. Re. Immediate suspension of vendor onboarding. Carter and Wexler, LLP. This memorandum serves as formal notice that I'm placing an administrative hold on the retention of Carter and Wexler, LLP, due to significant governance irregularities, unauthorized data disclosure, and potential conflicts of interest." I typed it out on my laptop. If I sent this, I was declaring war on Marcus. He would view it as betrayal. He would try to fire me. But if I didn't send it, I wasn't a lawyer. I was just a daughter doing what she was told. "You will never be a real lawyer." The voice in my head was loud. It sounded like him. I looked at the cursor blinking on the screen. "I am a real lawyer." I whispered to the empty room, "And real lawyers protect the client, even from itself." I attached the evidence: the Brad email log, the SOC report release log, and the anonymous tip about the containment plan. I added Helen Joe to the CC line. I hovered over the send button. My hand shook, just once. Then I clicked sent. The email whooshed away. I sat back in the silence. I had just thrown a wrench into the gears of a machine that had been grinding me down my whole life. I felt terrified, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, dangerously free. The fallout from my email to the board was immediate, silent, and absolute. It was the digital equivalent of pulling the fire alarm in a crowded theater. For 45 minutes, my inbox remained perfectly still. No replies, no Slack messages, just the humming of the air filtration system and the gray Seattle light filtering through my glass walls. Then, my door opened. Marcus did not knock. He walked in, closed the door behind him with a precise, heavy click, and stood by the frame. He was not yelling. Marcus Vance did not yell. He considered raising one's voice a failure of leverage. Instead, he looked at me with a disappointment so profound it felt like a physical weight. "You pressed the nuclear button, Audrey," he said. I turned my chair to face him. I did not stand up. Standing up would have looked defensive. I initiated a governance protocol. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice level, "I sent a legal hold. That is not nuclear. That is standard procedure when a vendor application contains evidence of a security breach." Marcus walked over to the window, staring out at the construction cranes dotting the skyline. "You humiliated me," he said softly. "You went to the board. You went to Helen Joe. You bypassed the entire executive chain of command because you have unresolved issues with your father." I felt the heat rise in my neck, but I clamped it down. "This is not about my father," I said. "This is about the fact that Brad forwarded internal risk assessments to an outside party without authorization. This is about the fact that procurement released our penetration test results without a contract. And this is about you being terrified of Graham Carter." Marcus interrupted, turning back to me. His eyes were cold. You are letting your childhood trauma dictate my company's strategy. You are jeopardizing our growth. Audrey, we are under pressure. We need heavy hitters. And instead of helping me solve the problem, you are creating new ones to prove some point to a man who isn't even in the room. I stood up then. I placed my hands flat on the desk. My duty is to this company. Marcus, not to your comfort, not to your timeline, and certainly not to my father's ego. If we hire a law firm that is already leaking our data before they are even on the payroll, we are not solving a problem. We are inviting a catastrophe. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. He looked like he was calculating the cost of firing me versus the cost of keeping me. We have an executive session at 2 o'clock, he said. Bring your evidence. But Audrey, if you are going to shoot at the king, you better not miss. He walked out. The executive boardroom was designed to intimidate. The table was a slab of reclaimed walnut that cost more than my student loans. The chairs were Eames. The silence was expensive. I sat at the far end. Marcus sat at the head. Ben, the COO, sat to his right. Looking pale and refusing to make eye contact with me, Brad was absent. Helen Jo was there, calling in via video link on the massive screen at the wall. Her face looming over us like a judicial deity. 2 other board members were also dialed in. Marcus opened the meeting. We are here because our general counsel has raised concerns regarding the engagement of Carter and Wexler, Marcus said. His tone breezy, dismissive. While I appreciate Audrey's vigilance, I believe her judgment in this specific matter is clouded by a personal conflict of interest. He looked at me. Audrey, perhaps you can explain why you are blocking a strategic partnership that Ben and I have both vetted? I stood up. I didn't use a slide deck. I didn't use a laser pointer. I used paper. I slid a dossier down the table to Marcus. I slid another to Ben. This is not a personal conflict, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the microphone for the board members. This is a forensic fact pattern. I opened my copy. Exhibit A, I said, an email log showing Brad, our VP of Sales, forwarding the Larkspur Vendor Risk Framework and the Project Chimera overview to Graham Carter's personal email on October 4th. This was 3 weeks before the firm applied. I turned the page. Exhibit B, the Carter and Wexler supplemental packet, dated October 25th. It contains 3 paragraphs that are verbatim copies of our internal risk framework. They did not analyze our risk. They plagiarized our own documents to sell our fears back to us. I turned the page again. Exhibit C, a log from our procurement portal. On October 26th, our SOC, 2 Type 2 report, and our Q3 penetration test results were downloaded by an external user associated with the firm. This release was authorized by the COO's office without a non-disclosure agreement in place. Ben shifted in his seat. It was a standard request. He mumbled, it was a security breach. I corrected. We handed the map of our vulnerabilities to a third party who had not yet been vetted. I paused. I looked at the screen, directly at Helen Jo's pixelated eyes, and finally, Exhibit D, an anonymous tip received via internal mail. A screenshot of a calendar invite from inside the firm titled Operation Larkspur. Containment Plan. The room went dead silent. Containment. I repeated, not representation, not advisory, containment. This suggests they believe we are already a toxic asset. It suggests they are preparing for a failure event, not a defense. Marcus leaned forward. His face was tight. These are coincidences. Audrey, you are reading tea leaves. You are looking for a conspiracy because you want to block your father. I am looking for integrity. Marcus, I said. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. It was a sharp, violent sound. I want you off this, he said. I am formally requesting your recusal. You are too close to this. You cannot be objective about Graham Carter. You are emotional. You are reactive. You are compromised. I looked him in the eye. I didn't blink. I agree. I said. Marcus froze. He hadn't expected that. What? I agree that my relationship with the proposed vendor creates the appearance of a conflict, I said calmly. Therefore, I will recuse myself from the final selection decision. Marcus relaxed, a triumphant smile touching his lips. Good. Then Ben and I will proceed with— However, I continued, my voice cutting through his victory, because the executive management team is also implicated in the unauthorized data sharing, specifically Brad and Ben, management cannot be the decision-maker either. The smile vanished. If I recuse, I said, then the decision must be elevated to the board of directors. The board must retain independent counsel to oversee the selection. Management is conflicted. I am conflicted. The only neutral party left is the board. I looked at the screen. Helen, do you agree? Helen Jo's voice crackled through the speakers. Dry and authoritative. I agree. The board assumes oversight of this vendor selection effective immediately. Management is stripped of decision-making authority regarding Carter and Wexler. Marcus looked like he had swallowed glass. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. I had just taken his power away. I had neutralized his emergency coverage. Thank you, Helen said. Audrey, you will coordinate the diligence, but the vote is ours. Meeting adjourned. The screen went black. Marcus stood up. He didn't say a word. He just gathered his papers and walked out. I sat there for a moment, my hands shaking beneath the table. I had won the battle, but I knew the war was about to get much uglier. The escalation arrived 24 hours later. It came via courier, a thick envelope made of heavy cream-colored linen paper. It was addressed to me, but also to the chairman of the board and the CEO. I opened it in my office. It was a demand letter from Carter and Wexler, but it wasn't signed by my father. It was signed by the head of their litigation practice, a man named Sterling Vance. No relation to Marcus, just a coincidence of the elite class. ERE, Demand for Retraction and Preservation of Evidence. Dear Ms. Carter, we represent Carter and Wexler LLP. It has come to our attention that you have made defamatory statements regarding our firm's ethics, financial stability, and data handling practices to the board of directors of Larkspur Risk Solutions. Your insinuations that our firm benefited from insider leaks or engaged in collusion are patently false and actionable. These statements constitute tortious interference with a valid business expectancy. We demand an immediate retraction of all written memoranda regarding our application. Furthermore, we demand you preserve all communications regarding your personal animus toward Graham Carter, as this will be relevant in future litigation regarding your breach of fiduciary duty. Govern yourself accordingly. I read the letter twice. Tortious interference, personal animus. My father was suing me. Well, technically, his firm was threatening to sue my company and me personally, but the voice was his. The strategy was his. He was trying to scare the board. He was telling them, if you listen to her, I will drag you into court. I will make this messy. I will make this expensive. It was a bully's move. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a cold, hard knot of resolve. If he was an innocent vendor, he would have called Marcus and asked to clarify the misunderstanding. He would have offered to open his books, but he didn't. He sent a threat. He was scared. I picked up the phone and called Helen Jo. Helen, I said, we just got a demand letter. I have it. She said, I am reading it now. He's trying to intimidate us. I said, I know. She replied, it is a standard suppression tactic. Audrey, this confirms everything. Innocent firms do not threaten defamation suits during a pitch process. They walk away. The fact that he is fighting this hard means he needs this engagement desperately. What do? We call his bluff, Helen said. I am authorizing the retention of Keystone Forensic Advisory. Keystone, the cleaners. They were a boutique investigations firm run by ex-CIA and ex-FBI forensic accountants. They didn't do law. They did truth. I want them to scrub Carter and Wexler, Helen said, and I want them to scrub our internal leak. We are going to find out exactly what is rotting underneath these floorboards. The Keystone team arrived on Monday. They didn't look like detectives. They looked like actuaries. They wore gray suits and set up in a conference room on the second floor. Covering the glass walls with brown paper for privacy, I was their point of contact. But I kept my distance. I provided them with the access logs, the emails, and the vendor packets, but I offered no commentary. I needed their report to be unimpeachable. While Keystone worked, the office atmosphere turned toxic. Brad, the VP of sales, disappeared. His name was scrubbed from the website on Tuesday morning, at noon, and all-hands email went out from Marcus. Team, Brad has decided to leave Larkspur to pursue personal opportunities. We thank him for his service. Personal opportunities, the corporate euphemism for caught red-handed. I walked past Brad's office. It was already empty. Boxes were stacked in the hallway. I felt a pang of guilt. Brad was a greedy fool, but he was just a pawn. My father had charmed him, used him, and then discarded him, and Marcus had sacrificed him to protect himself. Marcus was treating the leak as a personnel issue, rather than a systemic failure. He was trying to cauterize the wound before it spread to him. On Wednesday afternoon, the lead investigator from Keystone, a woman named Sarah with eyes like flint, asked to see me. "We have preliminary findings," she said. I sat down in the papered-over conference room. Sarah slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "First, regarding the leak," she said, "we confirmed the sales executive, Brad, sent the documents. However, we also found a secondary communication channel." "Secondary?" "Yes, text messages. Your CEO, Marcus Vance, has been in direct communication with Graham Carter via a private encrypted messaging app for 2 months. 2 months. That predated the application by weeks." "What were they discussing?" I asked. "We cannot decrypt the content yet," Sarah said. "But the metadata shows high-frequency exchange during the week the OCR notice arrived." She paused. "But that is not the most significant finding. Ms. Carter, we ran a deep background check on Carter and Wexler's current client roster using court filings and UCC lien searches, and they have an undisclosed conflict, a major one." She tapped the paper. "They represent Titan heavily in a patent dispute. Titan is Larkspur's direct competitor in the banking compliance space. If Carter and Wexler had access to your Project Chimera data, they would be ethically bound not to use it, but practically. They would have the blueprints to your biggest rival's technology." I stared at the paper. Titan. My father wasn't just looking for cash flow. He was potentially looking for trade secrets, or at least, he was willing to ignore a massive conflict of interest to get his hands on our retainer. "There is one more thing," Sarah said. She lowered her voice. "We found references in a dark web data dump, 3 months ago. A ransomware group claimed to have hacked a prestigious New York law firm. They posted a sample of data. The firm paid the ransom to suppress the leak. Carter and Wexler? The sample data matches their client formatting. If they paid a ransom to hide a breach and didn't disclose it to their clients, that is malpractice. That is disbarment territory. I felt cold all over. They are compromised." I whispered. "They have a hole in their own ship, and they are trying to board ours to stay afloat." "Exactly," Sarah said. "They need your retainer to show their insurers and their creditors that they are still viable. You are not a client. Ms. Carter, you are collateral for a loan. I needed air. I needed to get out of the glass box, out of the city, out of the blast radius. I drove south, away from Seattle, toward Tacoma. I drove to the only place that felt neutral. My mother's house was a small, tidy bungalow with a garden full of hydrangeas. She had divorced my father 10 years ago. It had been a quiet, devastating split. He hadn't fought for her. He had just let her go. As if she were an associate who wasn't billing enough hours. She was in the garden, wearing rain boots and a yellow slicker, deadheading the roses. "Audrey," she said, surprised. "You didn't call. I just needed to drive." "Mom." She looked at my face. She saw the stress lines, the shadows under my eyes. She pulled off her gloves. "Come inside. I made tea." We sat in her kitchen. It was warm and cluttered and safe. It smelled of cinnamon and wet earth. I told her everything, not the legal details. She wouldn't care about SOC reports, but the emotional ones, the gift basket, The real lawyer comments. The demand letter. He is suing me. Mom, I said, staring into my mug. He is threatening to sue his own daughter for doing her job. My mother sighed. She stirred her tea slowly. He isn't suing you. Audrey, he is suing the mirror. What does that mean? She looked out the window at the rain. You think your father was always the great Graham Carter. She said, the managing partner, the titan. But I knew him when he was 28. I looked at her. I realized I knew almost nothing about his early career. By the time I was born, he was already a legend. He failed. Audrey, she said quietly, his first big trial. He was a public defender. He had a client, a young boy accused of robbery. Graham was sure he was innocent. He was passionate. He was emotional. He fought with his heart, and he lost. She said, the boy went to prison. Graham fell apart. He didn't get out of bed for a month. He felt he was too weak. He felt his emotions had clouded his judgment. She turned to look at me. So he killed that part of himself. He decided that real lawyers they don't care about the client. They care about the win. He built that armor, that arrogance. Because he was terrified of ever feeling that powerless again, I sat in silence, absorbing this, the real lawyer insult. It wasn't about me. It was about him. He saw my empathy, my concern for ethics, my desire to do things the right way, and it reminded him of the boy who lost. He is afraid of you. Audrey, my mother said, you are the lawyer he wanted to be before he decided it was too painful. And now, you are standing in his way, and he is terrified because he knows you are stronger than he is. I felt a strange, shifting sensation in my chest. For years, I had hated him, I had feared him, but now, I felt pity. He was a scared old man hiding behind a wall of expensive suits and demand letters. But pity is dangerous, I reminded myself. Pity makes you lower your guard. Mom, I said, I understand him, but he is trying to destroy my company to save himself. I know, she said. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. So don't let him. You are not the boy he failed. You are the woman he made. Finish it. Audrey. I drove back to the city the next morning. My resolve hardened into something diamond sharp. When I walked into the office, Jessica, my assistant, looked nervous. Audrey, she said, have you seen LinkedIn? No. Why? She turned her monitor around. It was a flyer for the Pacific Northwest Legal Innovation Symposium, hosted by Carter and Wexler. It was a black-tie gala happening this Friday. And there, listed under Keynote Conversation, The Future of In-House Leadership, was my name, featuring Audrey Carter, General Counsel, Larkspur Risk Solutions, A Legacy of Excellence. I stared at the screen. He hadn't asked me. He hadn't invited me. He had just put my name on the flyer. He was claiming me. He was publicly announcing that we were aligned. If I showed up, I was endorsing him. If I didn't show up, I was the flake, the daughter who couldn't handle the spotlight, and the tagline, A Legacy of Excellence. He was taking credit for my career. He was telling the world, she is mine. She is a Carter. Her success is my success. It was a trap, a public relations bear trap. Audrey, Jessica said, people are already commenting. Recruiters are congratulating you. I walked into my office and closed the door. He wanted a public reaction. He wanted me to call him screaming. I opened my laptop. I logged into my own LinkedIn account. I didn't write a screed. I didn't write a denial. I wrote 2 sentences. I will not be attending the Carter and Wexler Symposium this Friday, nor did I authorize the use of my name or title in their promotional materials. My focus remains entirely on the governance and integrity of Larkspur Risk Solutions. Post. It was brutal. It was professional. It was public. Within 10 minutes, the comments started, then the screenshots. An hour later, a legal gossip blog, The Docket, ran a headline. Civil War? Larkspur GC publicly disavows dad's firm event. My phone started ringing. Reporters, recruiters. I ignored them all. I had just publicly humiliated Graham Carter. I had done the one thing he feared most. I had exposed the crack in the armor. I felt a grim satisfaction. But then, my door opened. It was Helen Jo. She was actually here, in the office. She never came to the office. Audrey, she said, "We need to talk." She looked grim. "The board is meeting tomorrow morning to vote on the blacklist," she said. "Based on the Keystone report, we have enough to bar Carter and Wexler permanently. The conflict with Titan alone is disqualifying." "That is good news," I said. "So why do you look like someone died?" "Because," Helen said, "I just came from a meeting with Marcus." She closed the door and lowered her voice. "Marcus knows he is about to lose the vote. He knows the board is going to block the firm. And he panicked. Audrey, he signed an emergency retainer with them this morning." I stood up, my chair knocking over behind me. "He what?" "He used his discretionary CEO authority for crisis management," Helen said. "He claimed the OCR investigation required immediate privilege. He signed a limited engagement letter with Carter and Wexler at 8 a.m. today. They are already onboarded. They have access to the servers." "But the legal hold," I stammered. "He ignored it," Helen said. "He is betting that once they are in, it will be too messy to kick them out. He is betting that the board won't fire a CEO in the middle of a federal investigation." I felt the room spin. He let them in. After everything, after the leaks, the lies, the threats, they are in the system. "Audrey," Helen said, "your father is inside the house." I looked at my computer screen. The LinkedIn post was still gathering likes. Integrity. I had won the public battle, but I had lost the building. I looked at Helen. "Then we have to burn it down." I said, "What do you mean?" "If Marcus signed that contract knowing about the conflicts, knowing about the security breach, then he breached his fiduciary duty. And if my father accepted the engagement knowing he was conflicted, then he committed malpractice." Helen finished. I grabbed my coat. "I am not going to the board meeting tomorrow to vote on a vendor." I said, "Then what are you doing?" "I am going to the board meeting to ask for the termination of the CEO, and I am going to file a complaint with the state bar against Graham Carter." Helen looked at me. She saw the change. The hesitation was gone. The fear was gone. "You realize," she said softly, "that if you do this, you destroy your family forever. There is no coming back from reporting your father to the bar." "I know." I said, "I thought about the boy he failed 40 years ago. I thought about the fear behind his eyes. But then I thought about Larkspur. I thought about the team I had built. I thought about the law. He told me I would never be a real lawyer." I said, I opened the door. He was right. Real lawyers settle. I am going to trial. I walked into the finance department at 7 in the morning, bypassing the elevators and taking the stairs to the 4th floor. The office was quiet, the air stale with the smell of old toner and coffee grounds. I found the accounts payable director, a nervous man named Arthur who always wore sweater vests, already at his desk. "Arthur," I said, "I need to see the CEO's discretionary spending ledger for the last 48 hours. Arthur jumped. "Audrey, I can't release that without Marcus's approval." I placed my hands on his desk. "Arthur, we are currently under a board-authorized forensic audit. If you withhold financial records, you are an accessory to concealment. Do you want to explain that to the SEC?" He paled, typed a password into his terminal, and spun the monitor around. There it was. Vendor, CW, Strategic Consulting. Amount, $49,999. Description, Executive Advisory Services. Authorization, M. Vance. It was brilliant in its cynicism. Our vendor onboarding policy, the one that required conflict checks, security audits, and my signature, only kicked in for contracts over $50,000. Marcus had priced the engagement exactly $1 below the threshold. He hadn't hired them as a law firm. He had hired them as consultants. He had used a loophole to bypass the entire legal department. I took a picture of the screen with my phone. "Thank you." "Arthur," I said, "you just saved your job." I didn't storm into Marcus's office. I didn't send an angry email. I went back to my desk and drafted a memo to the board. Subject, Material breach of internal controls. Executive discretionary override. I kept the tone clinical. I didn't mention betrayal. I didn't mention my father. I focused on the mechanics of the failure. The CEO has utilized a structuring technique to evade vendor governance controls. By pricing the engagement at $49,999, he deliberately bypassed the conflict check and security review protocols mandated by the board. This is not merely an administrative workaround, it is a control failure. If the CEO can unilaterally override governance for a conflicted vendor, our SOC2 certification is invalid. Regulators will view our internal controls as optional. I hit send. 10 minutes later, Helen Jo called me. He actually did it, she said, her voice tight with disbelief. He structured the payment like a money launderer. He is desperate. Helen, I said, he needs their protection more than he needs to follow the rules. The board is furious, she said. We are convening an emergency session tomorrow, but Audrey, you need to be careful. Marcus knows you found it. He is going to come for you. At noon, Sarah from Keystone Forensic Advisory came to my office. She looked tired. She had been digging through the digital debris of Carter and Wexler for 3 days. We found something else, she said, closing the door. She laid a chart on my desk. It was a visualization of Carter and Wexler's partner draw schedule, the money the partners took out of the firm's profits. Look at the last 2 quarters, Sarah said. The draws are down 40%, but the line of credit utilization is up 80%. They are borrowing to pay the partners. I said, exactly. That is a death spiral. But here is the kicker. We found a lawsuit filed under seal in Delaware. A former partner is suing the firm for breach of fiduciary duty regarding client funds. Client funds? My stomach turned. That meant the escrow accounts, the sacred money. If they are dipping into client escrow to cover operating expenses, I whispered, then it is a Ponzi scheme. Sarah said, or at least, it is dangerously close, and that explains why they are so desperate for Larkspur. They need a retainer. They need a fresh injection of cash to pay off the exiting partner before he goes public. My father wasn't just a bully. He was broke, or his firm was, and he was trying to use my company's treasury to plug the hole. I was processing this when my phone buzzed. A LinkedIn message request. Sender. Former CW associate. Subject. You need to know. I hesitated. Anonymous tips were usually garbage, but this one felt different. I accepted the request. The message appeared. Ms. Carter, I left the firm 3 months ago. You need to know why they are chasing you. It is not just the money. They need a clean corporate client to show their lenders. The bank is calling in their credit line because of the Titan conflict. They need to show a signed engagement letter with a reputable tech firm to get an extension. Also, ask your dad about the red file on Marcus Vance. I stared at the screen. The red file. It was a specific term. In Carter and Wexler parlance, a red file was a dossier of compromising material on an opponent. But Marcus wasn't an opponent. He was a client, unless he was a hostage. The red file detail was too specific to be made up. Only someone who had worked in that file room would know that terminology. I took a screenshot. I convened a war council with Helen Jo and the Keystone team in the secure conference room. We have 3 problems, I said, writing on the whiteboard. 1. Our CEO has bypassed controls to hire a conflicted vendor. 2. The vendor is financially unstable and possibly raiding client funds. 3. The vendor may be blackmailing our CEO with compromising information. Helen looked at the board. It is a perfect storm. I turned to them. Here is my proposal. I drew a line under the list. We terminate the CEO's unauthorized addendum immediately for cause. We self-report the policy breach to our external auditors, not the regulators yet, but the auditors, to show we are self-correcting. That protects us from accusations of a cover-up. And then? Helen asked. And then we retain neutral outside counsel, someone from the approved panel, like Latham or Skadden, to conduct a privilege review. We need to know if Marcus shared confidential materials with Carter and Wexler under this consulting arrangement. If he did, we need to claw it back. Helen nodded. It is aggressive, but it is the only way to save the company's license. Do it, she said. Draft the resolution. I went back to my office to draft the termination notice for the addendum. My hand was hovering over the keyboard when my personal cell phone rang. It was him. I looked at the screen. Dad. I knew why he was calling. He knew I had found the payment. He knew I was blocking the money. I took a deep breath. I pressed record on my dictaphone app. I answered, Audrey. His voice was low, stripping away the charm, the pretense of the loving father. It was the voice of a man who had run out of time. Hello? Dad, you are ungrateful. He spat. The word came out like a curse. After everything I did for you. Who paid for your law school? Who made the calls that got you your first clerkship? I paid my loans. Dad, I said calmly, and I got that clerkship on my merits. You have nothing that isn't mine, he shouted. The name Carter opens doors you couldn't even knock on, and now you are trying to humiliate me? You are trying to starve my firm? I am protecting my client. I said, that is what you taught me a real lawyer does. Don't quote me to me, he roared. You are a petty, vindictive little girl. You are angry because I never patted you on the head. So you are going to burn down a deal that could save us both? Save us? I asked. Or save you? If you kill this engagement, Audrey, I will ruin you. I will make sure you never work in this town again. I will tell every managing partner in Seattle that you are difficult, that you are unstable, that you leak privileged information. I will bury you. I felt the tears prick my eyes. It hurt. It hurt physically, like a blow to the chest. This was my father, the man who taught me how to ride a bike, the man I had wanted to impress my entire life, and he was threatening to destroy me because I wouldn't let him steal from my company. I closed my eyes. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I am recording this call for my notes. Dad, I said, my voice trembling only slightly. There was a silence on the other end, a dead, heavy silence. Then he hung up. I put the phone down. I put my head in my hands, and I wept. I cried for 5 minutes. I cried for the father I wanted, and for the father I had. I cried for the little girl who used to wait up for him to come home, hoping he would ask about her day. Then I wiped my face. I checked my makeup in the compact mirror. I was done grieving. Now I was just working. An hour later, Marcus called me to his office. He looked different. The swagger was gone. He looked tired, his tie loosened, his eyes rimmed with red. Audrey, sit down, he said. I sat. We need to stop this civil war, he said. It is tearing the company apart. The board is freaking out. The staff is gossiping. He leaned forward. I have a proposal, a compromise. I listened. We hire Carter and Wexler for a narrow, specific scope. Just the OCR investigation. No general corporate work. No access to the main servers. Just the one case. And in exchange? I asked. In exchange, he said, I will promote you to Chief Legal Officer. You get a seat on the executive committee, a 20% raise, and I will double your department budget. You can hire whoever you want. I looked at him. He was offering me a bribe, a promotion in exchange for my silence. He wanted me to sell out my governance principles for a title. It was tempting, God. It was tempting. It would be a huge win for my career. I would be a C-suite executive at 33. I could hire a team to do the dirty work. I could make peace with my father. But then I thought about the red file. I thought about the escrow account. If I said yes, I wasn't a chief legal officer. I was an accomplice, Marcus. I said slowly. Why are you so determined to hire them? Why take this risk? There are 20 other firms who could handle the OCR case. Why them? Marcus looked away. He picked up a paperweight, turning it over in his hands. Because Graham Carter knows things, he said quietly. About the company? About me? Marcus said. He looked up. His eyes were bleak. 5 years ago, before I came to Larkspur, I was involved in a lawsuit at my old company. A harassment suit. It was messy. It was settled out of court. Sealed. And Graham Carter represented you? No, Marcus said. Graham Carter represented the plaintiff. I froze. He has the file, Marcus whispered. He has the depositions, the photos, the texts. If that comes out. Audrey, I am finished. My career is over. He leaned across the desk. He called me 2 months ago. He said he was reviewing old files and thinking about writing a memoir. And then he mentioned he noticed Larkspur was growing. It was extortion. My father was blackmailing the CEO of my company to get a vendor contract. He wasn't just a bad lawyer. He was a criminal. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. This was the red file, Marcus, I said softly. If you hire him, it never ends. He will bleed you dry. He will keep raising his rates, keep demanding more scope. You are not buying his silence. You are renting it. And the rent always goes up. I know, Marcus said, his voice breaking. But what choice do I have? You have me. I said. I stood up. I can protect you. Marcus, but only if you come clean. We go to the board. We disclose the extortion. We frame Graham Carter as a hostile actor attacking the company's leadership. We turn the victimhood around. Marcus shook his head. I can't. The board will fire me for hiding the conflict. They might, I admitted. But if you hire him, and the auditors find out, you go to jail. Marcus stared at his hands. I need time, he said. You don't have time. I said, the board meets tomorrow. I walked out of his office. I had the final piece of the puzzle. The CEO wasn't corrupt. He was compromised. My father was the villain in every direction. He was defrauding his partners, blackmailing his clients, and gaslighting his daughter. I went back to my desk. I had to prepare for the board meeting. I needed a narrative, a clean, undeniable story that would force the board to act. I opened a new document, board presentation, the Carter-Wexler risk assessment. Slide 1, the governance breach, structuring payments to evade controls, unauthorized release of security data. Slide 2, the vendor instability, financial distress signals, credit line utilization, escrow irregularities, undisclosed conflicts, Titan. Slide 3, the extortion dynamic, undisclosed prior adverse relationship between vendor and CEO, leverage being used to force engagement. I looked at slide 3. I couldn't put the harassment suit in writing yet. It was too sensitive. I would have to deliver that verbally, in executive session. I worked through the night. I cross-referenced every fact with the Keystone report. I attached the Brad email logs. I attached the screenshot of the payment. I was building a guillotine. At 3 a.m, I stopped. I looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my father was probably sleeping soundly. Or maybe he was awake, drinking scotch, thinking he had won, thinking I was too weak to pull the trigger. He had spent my whole life telling me I wasn't real because I didn't fight dirty. He was wrong. I didn't fight dirty. I fought with the light on. I saved the presentation. I was ready. The final board meeting did not feel like a battle. It felt like an autopsy. The room was airless. The blinds were drawn against the morning glare, casting long, severe shadows across the walnut table. I sat at the far end, my laptop open, my hands resting on a stack of documents that represented the dismantling of 2 careers, my father's and my CEO's. Marcus sat 3 seats away. He was not looking at me. He was staring at a fixed point on the wall, his face gray and slack, the face of a man who had not slept in 48 hours. Helen Jo sat at the head of the table, her presence radiating a terrifying, silent neutrality. I stood up. I did not clear my throat. I did not apologize. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I began, my voice steady. We are here to make a decision regarding the engagement of Carter and Wexler LLP, and to address a critical failure in our internal controls. I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared on the screen. It was a simple timeline. October 4th. Unauthorized data transfer from Sales VP to Graham Carter. October 12th. Containment plan calendar entry created at Carter and Wexler. October 25th. Vendor application submitted with plagiarized internal data. Yesterday. CEO executes unauthorized consulting agreement using discretionary funds. I turned to the board. We are facing a tripartite decision. I said, I call this the decision matrix. I brought up the next slide. Option 1, I said, we ratify the engagement. We allow Carter and Wexler to proceed. The consequence is that we inherit their undisclosed conflict of interest with our competitor, Titan. We also validate a culture where executive leadership can bypass security protocols. We signal to the market and to the regulators that our governance is for sale. I let that sink in. Option 2. I continued. We reject them quietly. We pay a termination fee on the unauthorized contract and walk away. The consequence is reputational blowback. Carter and Wexler will likely leak that we are difficult clients. They may sue for breach of contract. It will be messy, and it will be loud. I paused. I looked directly at Marcus. Option 3. I said, we formally bar them from the vendor panel for cause. We cite the conflict of interest, the data handling irregularities, and the financial instability revealed by our forensic audit. Simultaneously, we self-report the internal policy breach to our external auditors and initiate a remediation plan. We choose pain today to ensure survival tomorrow. I sat down. Helen Jo turned to the woman beside her. Sarah, the lead investigator from Keystone Forensic Advisory. Sarah stood up. She didn't have my emotional connection to the case. To her, this was just math. Keystone has completed its diligence, Sarah said, her voice crisp. Our findings are unequivocal. Carter and Wexler's disclosure forms were materially incomplete. They failed to list 3 active malpractice suits. They failed to disclose a significant revenue dependency on a direct competitor of Larkspur. She slid a thick report down the center of the table. Furthermore, she added, we found evidence that their data requests regarding your security architecture were inconsistent with legal advisory work. They requested administrative access levels that would have allowed them to export proprietary code. Given their financial distress, specifically, a credit line utilization of 95%, this creates an unacceptable risk of IP theft or espionage. The room went cold. Espionage. It was a heavy word. Helen Jo looked at the other board members. They nodded, one by one. It was a silent, synchronized execution. The chair moves to permanently bar Carter and Wexler LLP from doing business with Larkspur Risk Solutions. Helen said, all in favor? Every hand went up. The motion carries, Helen said. She turned to Marcus. Marcus, she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was disappointed, which was worse. You signed an addendum to bypass a control you helped write. You authorized a payment to a vendor that your general counsel had placed on a legal hold. Marcus stood up slowly. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He didn't look like a titan of industry. He looked like a man who had been cornered in a dark alley. I did what I had to do, he said, his voice raspy. We are under investigation by the OCR. We needed a firm that could handle the dirty work. Audrey is brilliant, but she plays by the book. Sometimes you have to burn the book to save the company. He looked at me then, his eyes pleading for understanding. Graham Carter promised me he could make it go away. Marcus whispered, I was trying to protect us. You were trying to protect yourself. Helen said sharply, we know about the personal file. Marcus, we know he had leverage on you. Marcus flinched. The color drained from his face. That makes you compromised. Helen continued. You cannot lead a public company while being extorted by its vendors. She gestured to the door. Marcus Vance, you are placed on administrative leave effective immediately. Pending a full investigation into your prior relationship with Graham Carter, please hand your badge and devices to security on your way out. Marcus looked at me one last time. There was no hatred in his eyes anymore, just a profound, exhausting regret. He took off his lanyard and placed it on the walnut table. The plastic click sounded like a gunshot. He walked out. The door closed. The room was silent. We had cut off the head of the snake, but the body was still thrashing. The retaliation came 3 hours later. I was in my office, watching the rain streak the glass. When my phone started lighting up, Google alerts, Twitter notifications, LinkedIn tags. Carter and Wexler had issued a press release. It was a masterpiece of legal spin. Carter and Wexler, LLP. Withdraws from representation of Larkspur Risk Solutions. Seattle, Washington. The law firm of Carter and Wexler, LLP, announced today that it has voluntarily withdrawn its application to represent Larkspur Risk Solutions. While we admire Larkspur's technology, we found their internal governance environment to be incompatible with our standards of partnership, said Sterling Vance, head of litigation. We wish them the best as they navigate their internal challenges. Incompatible with our standards, it was a polite way of calling us a dumpster fire. They were controlling the narrative. They were firing us before we could announce we had banned them. Then came the industry chatter. A friend from a rival tech firm texted me, hearing rumors that Larkspur is unrepresentable, that you guys are nightmare clients who don't pay bills. What is going on? A headhunter emailed my work address. Audrey, seeing some instability in the market regarding your leadership team. If you're looking for an exit, let's talk. I felt a wave of nausea. I felt exposed. My father was making good on his threat. He was poisoning the well. He was painting me as the problem, the difficult woman, the unreal lawyer who couldn't manage a relationship. I walked to Helen Joe's temporary office in the boardroom. They are hitting us. I said, they are controlling the story. Helen didn't look up from her iPad. Let them talk. She said, gossip has a half-life of 48 hours. Integrity lasts forever. We need to respond. I said, no. Helen said, we do not get into a mud fight with a pig. We get clean. She handed me a drafted memo. We are sending this to the entire company, and then we are sending a formal notification to our external auditors. Deloitte. We are going to tell them everything. The breach, the payment, the remediation. But if we tell Deloitte, I said, they will flag it in the annual report. It will be a material weakness. The stock will take a hit. Short-term pain, Helen repeated. If we hide it, and it comes out later, it is fraud. If we disclose it, it is governance. Send the memo. Audrey, show them what a real lawyer does. I went back to my desk. I sent the memo. To all staff. From Office of the General Counsel. Commitment to ethical standards. Today, Larkspur leadership took decisive action to strengthen our vendor governance protocols. We identified a breach of policy regarding a potential vendor and have taken steps to remediate it. We hold ourselves to the highest standard, even when it is difficult. Transparency is our shield. I hit send. I felt a strange lightness. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't playing 4D chess with my father. I was just telling the truth. The call came at 8 o'clock that night. The office was empty. The cleaners were vacuuming the hallway. My phone buzzed on the desk. Dad, I stared at it. I could let it go to voicemail. I could block him. But that would be running away. I picked it up. Audrey. His voice was unrecognizable. The booming baritone was gone. The charm was gone. The anger was gone. He sounded hollow. He sounded old. Hello. Dad. I saw the press release. He said, and I heard about Marcus. You got him fired. He got himself suspended. I corrected gently. There was a long silence. I could hear the clinking of ice in a glass. He was drinking. You know what you did today? He asked. You didn't just hurt me. Audrey, you hurt the firm. You hurt the partners. We needed that retainer. I needed that retainer. I know. I said, Titan is going to drop us. He whispered, the bank is calling the loan tomorrow. I might lose the building. I might lose the name. I felt a pang of sorrow, sharp and deep. The firm was his life. It was his identity. I am sorry. Dad, are you? He asked. His voice cracked. He sounded like a child asking if the monster was real. Audrey, tell me the truth. Was it worth it? Destroying your own family? Humiliating your father? Just to prove a point? Was it worth it? I looked out the window at the city of Seattle, a grid of lights against the black water. I thought about the fear I had carried for 33 years, The fear of his judgment, the fear of not being enough, the fear of the real lawyer. I realized then that he still didn't get it. He thought I did this to hurt him. He thought this was vengeance. It wasn't vengeance. It was liberation. I didn't do it to hurt you. Dad, I said softly. Then why? He pleaded. Why? I took a breath. The air in my lungs felt clean. I did it so that nobody could ever buy my silence again. I said, I did it so I could look in the mirror and like who I saw. He didn't answer. I heard him breathe, a ragged, wet sound. Goodbye, Dad. I said. I hung up. I waited for the crash. I waited to fall apart. But I didn't. I just felt tired. The good kind of tired. The kind of tired you feel after you finish a marathon you never thought you could run. The victory lap was short-lived. The next morning, a priority email landed in my inbox from the General Counsel of MedNet, our largest healthcare client. Subject: Inquiry regarding vendor governance. Audrey. We saw the press release from Carter and Wexler and the subsequent industry chatter. We are hearing rumors of a data breach involving your executive team. Given that you host our patient data, we need immediate assurance that no MedNet confidential information was compromised during this internal challenge. If we do not receive a satisfactory response by EOD, we will be forced to trigger the termination clause. My heart hammered. This was the aftershock. My father's vague insinuations were spooking the herd. I couldn't lie. I couldn't say, everything is fine. I walked into the war room. Helen was there. MedNet is panicking. I said, they want assurances. Tell them nothing happened. Helen said, I can't. I said, technically, Brad forwarded internal risk documents. If I say no leakage, and it turns out he forwarded a MedNet file by accident, we are liable for fraud. So what do? I do the only thing I can do. I said, radical transparency. I drafted the response. Dear David, we value our partnership with MedNet above all else. In the spirit of total transparency, I can confirm that Larkspur identified an isolated violation of our document handling policy by a former employee. We immediately contained the issue and initiated a forensic audit. We cannot ask you to trust us on blind faith. Therefore, we are offering to pay for an independent third-party attestation of your data's security. We are also granting MedNet full audit rights to review our remediation steps regarding this specific incident. We are not hiding our scars. We are showing you how we healed them. I sent it. It was a gamble. Giving a client audit rights was invasive. It was expensive. 2 hours later, the reply came. Audrey, thank you for the honesty. Most GCs would have given me a boilerplate denial. We accept the offer for the independent attestation. Let's get it scheduled. We are staying. I exhaled. I had saved the account, not by being a shark, but by being real. Friday afternoon. The office was quiet. The interim management team was settling in. The storm had passed, leaving the landscape changed but standing. Helen Jo knocked on my door. She was holding a file. Audrey, she said, the board met this morning. I stiffened. Am I being fired? No, she said, a rare smile touching her lips. We are appointing an interim CEO to replace Marcus, but we need someone to hold the line on governance. We need a chief risk officer. She placed the file on my desk. We want you to take the role. Interim CRO. It comes with the promotion Marcus offered you, but without the bribe, you earned it. I looked at the file. Chief risk officer. It was a massive job. It meant I wasn't just the lawyer anymore. I was the conscience of the company. I hesitated. Helen, I said, you saw the press release. You saw the gossip. My name is mud in the legal community right now. People think I am a patricidal maniac. Helen shrugged. Leadership is lonely. Audrey, and visibility always has a cost. You paid the price. Now take the seat. I touched the file. Thank you. Helen, I accept. Good, she said. Now go home. You look terrible. I drove to my apartment. It was dark when I arrived. I poured a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, listening to the city sounds, the sirens, the traffic, the distant hum of life. I felt a vibration in my pocket. My phone. I checked it. No new calls. But there was a notification. Voicemail box full. I hadn't checked my voicemail in weeks. I dialed in to clear it out. First message, deleted. Second message, deleted. Then I stopped. There was an old saved message from 3 years ago. I had saved it on the day I passed the bar exam. I pressed play. Audrey, it is your father. The voice was younger, stronger. I heard you passed. Top percentile. That is good work. I just wanted to say. There was a pause, a long, heavy hesitation. I wanted to say that I expect nothing less. Now the real work begins. Don't let it go to your head. Call me when you get a real job. Click. I sat there in the dark, holding the phone. He had almost said it. He had almost said he was proud. But he couldn't do it. He had caught himself, corrected himself, and retreated back into the criticism that was his only language of love. I listened to it again. That is good work. It was the closest I would ever get. I hovered my thumb over the 7 key. Delete. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep it. Part of me wanted to hold on to that crumb of validation forever. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I didn't need the crumb. I had the whole loaf. I had my integrity. I had my company. And I had the truth. I pressed 7. Message deleted. I felt a sharp pang of regret. It was final. The voice was gone. Then, the regret faded, replaced by the cool, steady rhythm of the rain falling on the city. I put the phone down. I took a sip of wine. I was a real lawyer, and for the first time in my life, the verdict was mine. Thank you so much for listening to Dad Said You'll Never Be a Real Lawyer. His firm applied to mine. This was a story about boundaries, integrity, and the incredibly difficult task of breaking free from the expectations of the people we love. I would love to know, where are you listening from today? And have you ever had to stand up to a family member in a professional setting? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel for more tales of justice, drama, and turning the tables. Don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in English. Until next time.